You're listening to the Chad Hasty Show on demand. Good for you. Now download the KFYO app and listen live weekday afternoons, 5 to 7 p.m. Central.
Broadcasting from the great state of Texas, this is the Chad Hasty Show. News and views with a Lone Star perspective. You can sound off during the show by sending Chad a text at 806-680-2790. That's 806-680-2790. Or call in at 1-800-687-0790. Now, here's Chad Hasty.
Good evening, Lubbock, Amarillo, Abilene, Wichita Falls, Midland, Odessa, over in Dallas, Fort Worth, down in Houston, over in El Paso, and anywhere else inside or outside the great state of Texas, wherever you may be listening on this Monday, January 8th, 2024. Welcome into the Chad Hasty Show. Glad to have you with us on the program today, where we've got crazy weather all over the state of Texas, including up in Amarillo, where it's about 24 degrees or so, and they've had a blizzard surprise in the Amarillo and Panhandle areas. Still getting some light snowfall, according to the updated weather. The real feel of 1 degree in Amarillo. It's chilly in Amarillo. For our listeners in the Lubbock area, we've had some reports of snow, tiny flakes of snow, but still enough snow that it got people very excited that there was snow. And still, probably enough snow to make people run to the supermarket, grab a little toilet paper, some bread, make sure they got milk, just making sure they had the provisions ready to weather out the storm that is brewing out there. And then in South Texas, including the Houston area, you've got some rainstorms and thunderstorms that are popping up as well. So, and Dallas-Fort Worth has had some rain and storms. So it's been a day of weather across the state of Texas. We've got a lot of other news to get into, a lot of stories to get to today here on the program, including it's primary season. It's officially primary season out there. We'll have Liz Case. She's a candidate for HD 71. We'll visit with her, Republican candidate for HD 71, running against Stan Lambert in House District 71. She'll join the program coming up at 5:35. Scott Braddock of QuorumReport.com joins the show at 6:05 this evening. We, of course, have other news to get to, including the story out of Fort Worth today that has been popping up, an explosion at a hotel in Fort Worth. They're suspecting a gas leak caused the blast. 11 people injured, 1 critical, 2 serious, according to the latest reports out of Fort Worth. Obviously, Fort Worth PD telling people to stay away from the downtown area. And this is a developing story as right around 4 o'clock, 4:30, that's when we started getting reports that something had happened in downtown Fort Worth and that there was a large police presence in the area. And then it eventually came out that there was an explosion at the Sandman Hotel in downtown Fort Worth. And then it's since come out that a suspected gas leak is what has caused the blast. 11 people injured, 1 critical, 2 serious, according to the latest reporting out of Fort Worth. So we've got that we'll be focusing on and taking a look at throughout the show today. We've also got the latest national headlines to get into, and of course how a big time official can stay in the hospital for over a week. For over a week now. Without anybody knowing. The Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, we're basically at a state of war around the world. And the Defense Secretary has been hospitalized for, quote unquote, several days And that was before the White House was even notified that the Secretary of Defense, sort of an important position, sort of kind of an important position, some of his aides were told that he was just working from home when he was actually in the hospital, not working from home. And the White House had no idea. The adults are not running things in Washington, D.C. So we've got that to talk about on the show today. We've got that Alaska Airlines flight that we'll get you updated on as well. And some of the fallout from that, just a crazy story that we'll be talking about. Also, Iowa, the Iowa caucuses in a week. We've got that to get into. And we've got town halls tonight, tomorrow, and the next day. Nobody's going to be watching, with the next two town halls with Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. But then the Trumpster gets his town hall on Fox News, and that's what a lot of people will be watching. That's what a lot of folks will be seeing, what is going on and what Trump has to say. So we've got all of that going on. We've got your phone calls, your text messages as well throughout the show. We love to hear from you. Of course, interaction, a big part of the show. You can send us a text message at 806-680-2790. That's 806-680-2790. And when you do text in, let us know who you are, where you're listening from, so that way we can give you the proper shout-out when we go to the text line. And then, of course, you can call in at 1-800-687-0790. That's 1-800-687-0790. You can give us a call. You can also follow along on social media at Chad Hasty Radio. That's at Chad Hasty Radio on social media, where you can weigh in. And don't forget the Chad Hasty Show podcast, available anywhere you download your podcast from. That podcast will drop about 30 minutes after the show. And again, starting this week, we've got candidates who are going to be on the show throughout the week, this week, next week, and following weeks. So if you are a candidate who is running, number one, and this doesn't have to be for a statewide office or a district-wide office. This could be you running for mayor, you running for city council, you running for sheriff. If you're a candidate running for office and you'd like to appear on the show, send me an email, chad@kfyo.com. That's chad@kfyo.com. And, give us the information about your, what office you're running for, all that kind of good stuff. Send me the info and we'll get you on the show as soon as possible. But one of the great things about the podcast is that you can go through and you can grab the podcast where you heard different interviews, or maybe you missed an interview, and you can go back and listen to the candidates and what they say. What they say, their own words, how they feel about different issues. And so that's a good thing, and we'll have that available after each show. So look for the podcast about 30 minutes or so after the program. But if you're a candidate running for office, we'd love to have you on the show. Again, you can email me, chad@kfyo.com. So here's what it looks like just as of right now. We've got the mayor of Dallas, actually. He'll be joining us tomorrow. Eric Johnson, the mayor of Dallas. He'll be on with us tomorrow, along with Jeff Burnett with National Federation of Independent Businesses will join us. Wednesday will be an interesting day. We've got Matt Rose with LPNL who will be with us to explain the whole ERCOT transfer over. For those of you in Lubbock on LPNL, you got to choose a new energy provider. You're going to have to do it relatively soon. What does it all mean for you? When do you have to do it? Where do you get information from? Well, we'll tell you all about that on Wednesday with Matt Rose. You can submit questions as well on the text line for Matt, and we'll get to those. Also, Cody Clark, a candidate for SD30, will join us on Wednesday, and then Dustin Burrows is scheduled to join us on Thursday, and of course we'll have Mackenzie DeLulo as well. So busy week here on the program, but this is what happens this time of year when we get into the primary season. Ron in Lubbock weighing in. Ron in Lubbock saying, got my wood-burning stove going on with the pups hanging out, listening to Chad. Nice and cozy. Very good. Very good. Hope the pups learn something. Hope the pups learn something today. Nick, the first voice you hear from when you dial in, he's got his Snow Angel white sweater going on today. Of course, Nick, the producer and show librarian, as he is most commonly known. The Snow Angel White is what you're looking at today. You would blend in Amarillo today with the snow that they've had. Not so much here, but up in Amarillo, you would blend in quite nicely with what they have seen weather-wise. 806-680-2790. So real quick, this story out of Washington, D.C. Top Democrats now joining Republicans in critiquing Austin's medical secrecy. Quote, he has some splaining to do. Top Democrats voicing concerns, asking tough questions following the news that Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was hospitalized for several days before the White House was ever informed. Meanwhile, Republicans stepping up calls for the Pentagon chief to resign or be fired. The chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Jack Reed, said the major failure of disclosure must, quote, never happen again, urged the Pentagon to be more forthcoming about the facts. The top Democrat promised to closely track the situation. Yeah, sure. Quote, I remain concerned a vital chain of command and notification procedures were not followed with the Secretary under medical care. He's is taking responsibility for the situation, but this is a serious incident, and there needs to be transparency and accountability from the department. There has to be. Imagine for a second if Trump were president right now, and you have the Secretary of Defense, while major wars are breaking out around the world, and you had the Secretary of Defense just go AWOL for a while, and nobody had any idea he was in the hospital. And apparently having serious complications. Top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, Representative Adam Smith, and joined the panel's GOP chair, Mike Rogers, in airing their concerns about the series of events and pressuring more information from the Pentagon. Austin was hospitalized following complications from an earlier medical procedure on January 1st. Took days to inform senior White House officials, including the president. Like, wouldn't you think I don't know, maybe the Secretary of Defense himself, he's got some issues going on. So, maybe, I don't know, maybe like an intern or something inside the, inside of the office there, give the White House a call and go, hey, just want to let you guys know, Secretary of Defense, he's a little sick right now. He's in the hospital. We know that, we've got wars going on, and the United States is under threat of terrorist attack and everything. But just to let you guys know, Secretary of Defense is going to be out for a little bit. He's going to be out for a little bit of time. So there are a lot of questions out there, questions that need to be answered. Don't hold your breath, thinking that anything's going to happen or that anyone's going to be held accountable at all. Not with this administration. In fact, they'll probably say, well, we've explained the rules of letting us know. They'll issue a letter. Not even a reprimand, just a letter. And they'll say, next time we expect you to inform us in a timely manner. 806-680-2790. Oh, yes. Before I forget, before we take the first break, today would have been Elvis Presley's 89th birthday. So we ask you today, your favorite Elvis Presley song. You can text in at 806-680-2790. I've been told we do have Elvis songs in the system. Not all of them, but we do have some in the system. He's kind of famous, kind of a big deal, Elvis. It would have been 89 years old today. Your favorite Elvis Presley songs. You can text in at 806-680-2790. When we come back, your phone calls, your text messages, and so much more.
Don't try to save. My heart says go, go, have a time on Saturday night, babe, and I'm feeling fine.
The Chad Hasty Show can be heard all over West Texas, weekdays from 5 to 7 p.m. Tune in on News Talk 95.1 and 790 KFYO in Lubbock, News Talk 940 in Amarillo, News Talk 94.7 and 1470 KYYW in Abilene, and in Wichita Falls on News Talk 96.3 and 1290. The Chad Hasty Show. Make it a part of your drive home, weekdays from 5 to 7 p.m.
This message is from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Veterans deserve to know about the best services available to them. VA's new radio outreach page is a prime source for that information. The page, news.va.gov/outreach/radio, houses public service announcements that educate veterans on a cross-section of topics. That's news.va.gov/outreach/radio.
Talk Radio, Michael Berry. Weekday mornings 8:30 to 11 on News Talk 95.1 and 790 KFYO.
All right, welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show. Hope you're having a wonderful Monday. Got the national championship game tonight. Michigan and Washington. It'll be a good game to catch this evening. Let's see here. A couple of different things to get into. We have now I saw this posted on social media earlier. And again, this is why you need to pay attention to all the different campaigns, all the different races. And sometimes you've got to do maybe your own little research into things. Adam Hernandez, who is running for mayor of Lubbock, and he's part of this group that is trying to get marijuana decriminalized in Lubbock, which is not going to work. But he's part of this Lubbock. What is it called? Lubbock Communist Party. Anyway, he's part of this group out there. He's running for mayor, and he took to Facebook to say, family, friends, campaign supporters, we need your help. He said, we've got to pay for access to the Voter Access Network. Now, Nick, do you have any idea what the Voter Access Network is? No. 99% of people have no idea what the Voter Access Network is. Then he puts VAN in parentheses. He says, so that way we can start engaging voters and tracking our progress. Without this, we can't fully and effectively start campaign activities that will help us be successful. The access cost is $1,100. Now, this is a guy running for mayor of Lubbock for the second time. I doubt he's got a standing invitation to appear on the show. I don't know if he'll actually take it or not. He wasn't happy with me the last time he appeared on the show. But we'll see if he comes on. But let me ask you folks this. Adam Hernandez, who tries to act as though he's nonpartisan, and publicly he tries to act like he's nonpartisan, he's for everybody. He's a candidate for the people. The Voter Access Network is voter information through the Texas Democrat Party. Now, it's really easy to find this out. All you have to do is Google Voter Access Network, and there you go. It comes up about the Texas Democrat Party and about how candidates can get all this information, and you track voters. You track Democrat voters in Texas. He wants to track Democrat voters in Lubbock. Now, wait a minute. I thought this was a nonpartisan race. I thought that this was not supposed to be about Democrat and Republicans. I guess this is about bringing Democrats out to the polls. Just like signing people up to decriminalize marijuana in Lubbock was about trying to get as many Democrats as possible to sign up so they would have access, so the Hernandez campaign would have access to all these different potential voters. Listen, it's a very smart way to go about it. I'm not saying it's not a very smart way. For Adam Hernandez, it's a very smart way of trying to campaign. He's trying to turn out Democrats in Lubbock. But he knows that he can't just turn out Democrats. He knows that he's got to appeal to independents out there. He's got to appeal maybe to some of those evil conservatives out there. Because even Adam Hernandez is smart enough to know that you can't run as a Democrat and win in Lubbock, Texas. Not yet. Now, at some point, you might be able to, but not yet. So instead of telling people, hey, I need access to the Democrat-run voter access network, I need the access to what the Texas Democrat Party puts out there, instead of saying that, he just wants everyone to know, well, I need access to the voter access network. That's all I need. And that's how again, with these candidates, and these candidates are all over the place. They're not just in Lubbock. They're not just in Abilene or in Amarillo. They're all over the place, where they try to act as, well, we're for everybody. Oh, we're trying to, not necessarily populist, but we're for everybody. We're not about Democrat or Republican. We're for the independent voter. We're for the independent, the small guy. We want to lift up the average citizen in Lubbock, and then we want to have access to a voter access network, which nobody knows what the hell that means. And then you see, oh, well, he wants to appeal to the Democrats. He wants to make sure he turns out Democrats in his campaign. Just remember that, because some of your Republicans were fooled last time. There were Republicans who liked Adam Hernandez last time. Just remember who he's going after. When we come back, your phone calls, your text messages, and we'll have Liz Case on with us as well.
The Chad Hasty Show, weekdays 5 to 7 p.m. Sound off during the show by sending Chad a text at 806-680-2790.
We live Texas. We breathe Texas. The landmarks, the swagger, and the lore make us who we are. We devour the tastes and the smells of our state. You just might say there's something in the air. So do your part to help protect it. Keep your tires at the correct pressure and avoid idling at drive-thrus. Both help reduce emissions. For tips, visit drivecleantexas.org. Drive Clean Texas. Live and breathe it. Brought to you by TxDOT.
There will be one less birthday party to celebrate today. One less coffee date with a friend today. One less family dinner today. Because there will be one less motorcycle rider on the road today. On average, a motorcyclist is killed on Texas roads every day. When you're behind the wheel, obey the speed limit and be extra careful at intersections. Let's start turning that one less into one more. Please share the road and look twice for motorcycles. There's a life riding on it. A message from TxDOT.
The news and talk of West Texas. News Talk 95.1 and 790 KFYO. You're listening to The Chad Hasty Show.
All right, welcome back to The Chad Hasty Show. Appreciate you being out there today. It is primary season, and we've got candidates who will be joining us throughout the next 57 days leading up to the Texas primary and Super Tuesday. So we're counting down the day. It's going to go by quickly. We know that. And that maybe that's a good thing, or that's a bad thing for some of the candidates out there. But we invite all the candidates who are running for office. You can email me, chad@kfio.com, and we'd be happy to get you on the show. Our next guest joining us here today to talk about their campaign, we have Liz Case joining us here on the Chad Hasty Show. She's a Republican candidate running for House District 71 against the incumbent who is Stan Lambert in that district. And Liz Case, the challenger in the Republican primary there in HD 71. Liz, welcome to the show. How are you this evening?
I am doing great. Thank you, Chad.
Absolutely. Glad to have you with us today. Before we get into some of the policies and stuff, tell folks a little bit about your background and who you are.
Well, I am a mother of four and a grandmother, and I taught school for over a decade. I've worked for some nonprofits. I've also worked in politics on kind of all sides of politics. I've done volunteer work for every level of candidate. I've worked in a candidate's office. I've also worked for them on their campaigns. So I've done a little bit of everything.
You've seen it all.
Pretty much.
You've seen how it works behind the scenes, which is something not a lot of people know how some of this stuff goes behind the scenes. What made you then decide to run for office and want to be the elected official in HD 71?
Well, 8 years ago, I was at the Alamo, and they decided that they wanted to reimagine the Alamo and basically rewrite history. So I left San Antonio and went directly to Austin to have a little chat with my elected officials and let them know how I felt about that. Because I am a descendant of Colonel William Barrett Travis, the commander at the Alamo. Mm-hmm. So I felt like if I didn't do that, then I might get poked with that sword in my sleep. I just couldn't let that stand.
Sure.
So that session, I worked on Alamo monument-related things. And as long as I'd been in politics, I'd never been down to Austin to work on legislation. So for that session, that's what I worked on. And then I started looking at all other areas of legislation and saw that there were a lot of issues that need to be worked on. Mm-hmm. So I've been active in Austin for the last 8 years.
So what, I guess, as far as you and your opponent, you're running obviously because you probably disagree with the incumbent on a few issues. I would assume. What are those issues, and what exactly are one or two things that you would like to focus on immediately if you are elected?
Well, there are many differences between my opponent and I would say one of those biggest differences is the level of activity. I was on the Legislative Priorities Committee at the state convention the last 2 cycles. And all the delegates from Texas come together and decide what our priorities should be for the next session. And those are things that are very important to the Republican Party voters. And our legislators have not been doing a good job of getting those things achieved. Now, we did get some big wins this session, and I'm really proud of the things that we did get accomplished. We got the girls' sports bill passed for college so that only biological women can play in girls' sports. Last session, we got that passed for junior high and high school, and this session we got it done for college girls. We also got a bill passed that says that no drag shows can happen in the presence of minors. Kind of a thing that you would think is, a common sense thing.
Right.
But it was a hard fight, believe it or not. We also got a bill passed that says that the book manufacturers have to put a rating on the books that go in public school libraries to tell those librarians what the content is. So if it has LGBTQ themes in it, for example, then they just need to tell the librarians this is what the content is, and if they plan on ordering it, then they know what's in there. That was a big win. We passed a bill that stops the DEI hiring practices in colleges. So we had some really big wins. One of the biggest things that we got done was stopping gender mutilation of minors. It took us 4 sessions to get that done, but we got it done this session. So we've had a lot of wins for conservatives.
Well, let me play devil's advocate here.
Okay.
For those who are listening and maybe they're for your opponent, or maybe they're on the fence, they're undecided. They might be sitting here going, well, wait, you just rattled off a lot of good wins. Why do we need to make any changes?
Well, I'll tell you why. My opponent got an award from one of our major magazines, Texas Monthly, and they labeled my opponent as furniture, saying that he's about as useful as the chair that he sits in. Now, he's been there 8 years, 4 sessions, and this session he passed one bill, and the governor wouldn't even sign that bill. So I just really think that the people in this area deserve somebody who is going to fight for them. We've got a lot of important battles going on right now. There's a lot at stake. And for our kids and our grandkids, somebody's got to stand up. And that's not happening right now in HD 71.
Let me ask you about just a couple of different policies out there. And we're visiting with Liz Case, a candidate for HD 71 here on the Chad HD Show. School choice. Obviously, that has been a battle for many sessions. You obviously know that. You've been you've been working with folks, and this has been a key issue in the Republican Party. You have obviously a lot of Republicans who are all for school choice. You've got other Republicans who are not for school choice. So forget about the Democrats for right now. We've got some Republicans who are not for school choice. How do you feel about school choice?
School choice is a complex issue. This is something that we've been talking about in the legislature for decades, actually. And school choice used to be a much more black and white issue because you either had public school or you had private school. And back at that point, you really didn't have a homeschool. And now that's a viable option for a lot of people. And because of COVID and because of the smut that they're teaching in our public schools, not all of them, but many of them, it's become a viable option for a lot of people. And I'm definitely pro-public school. I was a public school teacher for over a decade, and all 4 of my kids went to public schools. I come from a long line of teachers, and none of us ever taught in a private school. I think the bottom line comes down to we've got to trust Texas parents to make the very best decisions for their children. God gives us the right to direct the health, the education, the welfare. Every decision that should be made for a child needs to be made by a parent, not by a school psychologist, not by the school district, not by any teacher. No, none of the things about their welfare should be withheld from the parent. And I think we've got to empower the parents to make the choices for the kids.
So if you would have been in the legislature this go around, would you have signed on to the bill that was put forward by Republicans?
Well, that's even a complicated question, and I'll tell you why. Because there were 4 different bills that were put forward. Because the House bill in the regular session was different than the House bill in the special session. The House bill was over 200 pages long.
Right.
And in Washington, that's not unusual, but for Texas, that is a horrendous amount of pages.
Was there one, we're limited on time here, so I'm trying to get an answer. Was there one of those bills that you liked that you would have said yes to?
I liked the Senate bill much more than any of the other bills, especially in the second special.
Right.
Because they took out any interference to homeschools, and I think any good bill has got to make sure that we don't have any interference in private school and homeschools. That's key to this. And it made sure that our rural school districts were not going to suffer. It was going to make them whole. So if a child left, they were still going to get paid as if that child was there. And that's important. And also, it gave us a whole lot of support for our public education, because we know that no matter what they do, they're going to give the special ed kids and the low-income kids first priority. But 90% of our 5.4 million kids are still going to be in public schools.
Right.
So that's what we've got to fix.
Liz, visiting with Liz Case right now, running for HD 71, Republican candidate, running in the GOP primary there in HD 71. Liz, tell folks what your website is so people can get more information, and we're going to get you on a couple more times, obviously, before the primary wraps up and before the vote happens, so that way you can talk again to the voters.
Well, perfect. My website is Liz, the number 4, Texas.org.
All right.
And I'd love to have people check me out.
All right, Liz Case, thank you so much for joining us today. It was good to meet you, and we'll get you back on the show pretty soon.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. That's Liz Case. She's a Republican candidate running in HD 71. We'll be right back on the Chad Hasty Show.
Train I ride, 16 coaches long.
I answered the call. Together, we fought for our nation and its people. And even though I no longer wear the uniform, I am still a Marine. My service has come full circle. I will continue to support my country and my community. Then and now, Semper Fidelis remains my promise. Always faithful, always Marine.
This message is from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Veterans, have you downloaded the VA Health and Benefits mobile app? It makes it easy to manage your health care and benefits. In a newer feature, the app lets you review your VA prescriptions. Download the app on your iPhone or the Google App Store, or wherever you get your mobile apps. That's the VA Health and Benefits mobile app.
Well, it's 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to get ready. Now go, cat, go, but don't you step on my blue suede shoe.
All right, welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show. Appreciate you tuning in today. We'll have Scott Braddock on at 6:05. You can send in your thoughts on the text line, 806-680-2790. We've had a few text messages. Jailhouse Rock, another text, their favorite Elvis song. You can text in and let us know your favorites as well. Let's see. Robert in Oklahoma asking if Nick has any specially made waterproof sweaters for this time of year. I don't know if he has waterproof sweaters or not, but he does. Again, he's got the sweaters that blend into the snow, so that's good. He can sneak up on you if at least if he was up in the Panhandle. He could today. 806-680-2790. That's 806-680-2790. I'm keeping tabs on what some of the candidates are saying out there, tweeting out there. Nikki Haley, she's gearing up for this battle in Iowa. Nikki Haley tweeting out this message: I will have a Haley term limits pledge and ask every candidate for Congress to sign it. And then we will find out where everyone stands on term limits. And then I'm going to give that information to the American people. See, that sounds bold, doesn't it? I'm going to tell the American people where Congress is. We know where Congress is. If Congress stood in favor of term limits for themselves, they would have passed it by now. She's not pledging to actually enforce term limits. She's not promising to pass term limits for Congress. She's just saying, hey, I'm going to put out a piece of paper and ask people to willingly tell me whether or not they support term limits or not. And then whenever they tell me, I'm going to tell you. Ooh, thank you, Nikki Haley. That's bold. That's the type of vision we need in 2024 is I'm going to send out a piece of paper and I'm going to ask everyone nicely to fill it out. And if they don't, well, there's going to be no consequences. And if they do, well, then I'm going to tell you, the American people, where they stand. And they're probably not going to respond to me anyway, so don't hold your breath. Well, Nikki Haley, does that mean you're going to get term limits done if you're president? Well, I didn't say that. I just said I'm going to send her out a pledge. You know, a strongly worded pledge and see what they say. Because that's what we did. We'll be right back on the Chad Hasty Show.
The Chad Hasty Show, a presentation of the Texas Town Square Media Network. The views and opinions expressed during the Chad Hasty Show are not necessarily the views of this station staff, management, advertisers, or Town Square Media. Broadcasting from the great state of Texas, this is the Chad Hasty Show. News and views with a Lone Star perspective. You can sound off during the show by sending Chad a text at 806-680-2790. That's 806-680-2790. Or call in at 1-800-687-0790. Now, here's Chad Hasty.
All right. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show. We've got a little snow falling in the Panhandle, Amarillo area. It's cold up north. Cold here in the Lubbock area as well. We're in the, let's see, where are we at right now? Looking at the interactive map. It's right around 32, 34 degrees outside, going up towards, if you're driving up I-27 going to Amarillo, you're going to get into some snow. It's just snow-packed going up towards Amarillo. Saw some video out of Dumas as well, where they've had a lot of snow, but it's in the 20s up north with a wind chill right around 1 degree, according to AccuWeather. And so we've got rain and thunderstorms down in the Houston area. We've got a blizzard up in the Panhandle. So how about that? That's Texas weather. Just as crazy, the Texas primary season has officially kicked off. And we like to bring on our good friend Scott Braddock, editor of QuorumReport.com, who will be crisscrossing the state, whether it's in galoshes or ski boots, wherever he may go. He'll be crisscrossing the state and seeing what's happening in our primaries. 'Tis the season. Happy New Year, Scott.
Happy New Year. Definitely needed the galoshes today here in Dallas-Fort Worth. The rain was pretty intense, and I think the rain was pretty heavy in Houston and DFW, and then you saw that was part of a larger storm system all across the kind of the middle section of the country right now. Nothing like what you just said. What is it, 34 degrees in Lubbock?
Yeah, 34 here in Lubbock, 24 in Amarillo.
Yeah, 55 here in DFW, but as you know, that hard freeze is going to come all our way, right, later in the week when we get to Friday. So bring it on, the cold weather, and bring on the hot politics.
That's right. It's going to be quite something. We've already had one candidate here on the show, Liz Case, who is in the primary challenging Stan Lambert. And I know what you're in the Dallas area taking a look at some of the primaries that are underway there in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Absolutely, and you know that the governor and the attorney general are casting their net pretty wide in trying to take on Texas House Republicans. That's where a lot of the action is going to be. As you said, with Representative Lamberts, of course, the governor's upset with him about his vote against school vouchers, and there are several candidates across the state, but mostly in rural areas, but not all. It's kind of interesting. Not all of them are just rural Republicans who are against the school voucher proposals that the governor was talking about and pushing so hard last year. There is a race in one of the suburban districts here. Representative Justin Holland, who was one of the 21 to vote against the governor's school voucher proposal, he faces a couple of opponents. One of them is a former spokeswoman for former President Trump. This is Katrina Pearson, who's run for a few things a couple of times, hasn't been successful. The governor hasn't endorsed in that race, but you might have seen he came out really just in a harsh way against Representative Holland the other day in a late-night tweet, and it's the kind of thing that I don't think, the average even Republican voter sees the governor's tweets, but of course these things get reported on, right? What did the governor say about these various candidates? And I think there's something interesting here, Chad, which is that I think the governor's attack on Representative Holland tells us a lot about what the governor and his political operation, including his political consultant, Dave Carney, I think it tells us what they think about, how potent an issue school vouchers, how, whether that's really something that can be the end of an incumbent's career. What I mean is, and you probably saw this, where the governor went after Representative Holland, he didn't just go after him about school vouchers. Right. He went after him about several things, right? He said, look, this guy's against school choice, but then he said that he also voted to infringe on, people's gun rights by voting for, in a committee, voting for something that was ultimately unsuccessful, but the proposal to raise the age to 21 for the purchase of certain firearms. Mm-hmm. And then also, interesting that he attacked Holland on the question of Democratic chairs in the Texas House, which previous to that tweet from the governor, I don't remember him ever weighing in on that. That's been something that some of the far-right groups in the state and, some of the county Republican parties and the state Republican Party have been railing against the fact that the minority party has chairman in the Texas House. For a long time, the governor really hasn't said anything about that, and now he's saying that because this representative supported Speaker Phelan, that he also therefore supports Democratic chairs. Stepping back and taking a look at this from 35,000 feet, Chad, I think that tells you that the governor thinks that he can't really beat these incumbents by just saying they're against school choice. He's got to add a whole bunch of other things. Now, there's inconsistency in what the governor is saying here. That the governor also endorsed a guy by the name of Sam Harless, who's a representative down in the Houston area, who was the other Republican to vote for increasing the age for the, buying the assault rifles to 21. And so there's no consistency there. And, of course, the governor also endorsed lots of Republicans who voted for Speaker Phelan. Right. So he's trying to have it all ways here. But I think what it really tells us is he doesn't think that, the railing about school vouchers is going to get the job done.
Do you think, Scott, that, and again, we do have a long time to really, peel back the onion on the endorsement deal, but you've got Ken Paxton, who is out making endorsements. You've got the governor who's making endorsements. The lieutenant governor has said that he may not officially make endorsements, but he may get involved in some of these House races. Do any of these individual endorsements, though, when it comes to the average voter, is that going to move anybody, or is it just going to confuse voters when they see at sometimes, well, wait a minute, the governor is saying this is a good conservative, Ken Paxton says this is a rhino, and the lieutenant governor may or may not weigh in on it. Well, who do I believe?
I tend to think that these endorsements have outsized influence when you have an open seat in either the Texas House or the Texas Senate, because when you don't have a Republican office holder that voters are familiar with, they look to other Republicans who they do know to try to figure out whether or not it's somebody that they ought to support, right? So when you see a Texas Senate seat open, there's one based here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and it stretches up into y'all's area, the Drew Springer Texas Senate seat.
Oh, yeah.
That's open, and that'll be a hot race, right? And in that race, it's one of the ones you're talking about, where although this isn't a House race where the impeachment is as big of a question, but Paxton supports one candidate and the governor supports a different one. And one of the candidates in that race, Brent Hagenbu, who I think you talked to on the radio here in DFW when you filled in for Mark Davis, that's somebody who the lieutenant governor has weighed in and said that he thinks that's who ought to be in the Senate. And he's got Abbott's endorsement as well as former Governor Perry. If the voters don't really have any familiarity with the candidate, I think those things matter more. When they know the candidate, as in the case of Stan Lambert, who you talked to, I think the endorsements matter less. And let me give you an example. We might have talked about this before. You remember a few primaries ago when Governor Abbott was supporting the challengers to 3 incumbents in Houston, San Antonio, and down in Galveston. Mm-hmm. I remember at the time, and this is the only other time that Governor Abbott really went hard after incumbents, so it's only really good frame of reference. At the time, the polling showed in those districts that while the incumbent Republican House members were popular with Republican voters in their area, I might have thought that maybe the governor wasn't popular with those voters in those areas because most of his candidates were not successful. But the polling showed that people in those areas really liked the governor. As far as Republican voters, they had high approval ratings that they gave Abbott. And so I think that when you have 2 Republicans or multiple Republicans who are all well thought of by Republican voters, it becomes a wash. That the people kind of stand on their record, they make their case. And the other thing that I would say about it is that a Texas House race, unlike a Texas Senate seat, unlike a race for Congress, certainly unlike a U.S. Senate race, which we'll get to that, at some point this year, when the Democrats figure out who their, candidate's going to be against Ted Cruz. Unlike those races, a Texas House race, this, Chad, you've covered so much of this, it's a local race. Yeah. It's not as determined by who endorsed who, when it comes to statewide officials weighing in. In some cases, people kind of bristle at the idea that someone in Austin ought to tell them who they should vote for. That's one thing. And then the other thing is it's all about what kind of race do you run as a candidate. I mean, I think that when you see the governor and the AG coming in and endorsing challengers to the incumbents, what the incumbents know, because they've run a few of these races and they've been successful, they know what they have to do is put their nose to the grindstone, go to every Republican event they can go to. They've got to block walk in their areas. They've got to have campaign volunteers and campaign workers knocking on doors in neighborhoods, talking directly to voters about exactly what's going on in this state, and selling the voters on the idea that their person is the person to go with. And as long as they're doing their work, I'm not sure these endorsements I'm not sure they matter that much.
Scott, before we get going here, that SD30 race is kind of interesting because there's a residency question. What do we know that's happening in that with that question right now? For I don't know if he's the leader or not, but one of the candidates who has gotten the most endorsements has a residency problem. It appears.
Yeah, there have been questions about whether Brent Hagenbu lives in the district in question, the one you're talking about, Senate District 30. This is in court now, and there's been a challenge from the candidate that, primarily from the candidate who's supported by Ken Paxton. I believe her name is Carrie D. Moore. And, I've got my notes here. There's so many candidates to keep up with. Anyway, they are they're locked in battle in court, and a judge asked everybody in that case to come back and make their arguments later this month on January 19th. And so I can tell you that in my years of covering Texas politics, whenever this has come up, without getting into all the details of this case, whenever this has come up, I can't ever remember, and I might be missing one or two, or in the history of the last 25 years or so, I can't ever remember this really becoming a thing that gets somebody kicked off the ballot in the state, because as has been said by people who understand the law better than I do. In Texas, residency is kind of a state of mind. There might be a person who has, several homes or, places that they live, especially, when you're dealing with folks who are running for office, a lot of them are people who own more than one home. These are people who have money to begin with, right? And that's the way they can't even afford to run for office. A lot of times folks will look to where the person takes their homestead exemption for their property taxes. But the person might as well just say, hey, yeah, I take my homestead on that one because that's the most expensive home that I own, but I really live at that one over there. And so, that does happen. There seems to be some questions about Hagen Boone, whether he's claiming to live at what appears to be a commercial business in the district. And so, it seems like it's a claim that needs to be fully litigated. It looks like that's going to happen. But again, I've never seen that pan out. I'd be surprised if he was not eligible to run based on that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
Great question.
Mm-hmm. Scott, what can people find over at quorumreport.com?
We will be reporting from, I was putting my list together, we'll be reporting from all of these, what I consider competitive districts. And, Chad, I'm trying to winnow it down to where the actual races are going to be. Because as I said at the outset here, the governor, the lieutenant governor, and as you pointed out, the attorney general, they're all going after so many incumbents. And at this point, it's a blizzard of words, a lot of talk, and I want to figure out where the action is going to be. So I'll be traveling the state, figuring out what's going on from DFW down to Houston, West Texas, and everywhere in between, to figure out what's really going on. And by the way, we'll be 1 week from today in Beaumont. We'll report on the show right before the rally starts there at 6:30 p.m. in Beaumont. The Attorney General Ken Paxton rallying the troops against Speaker Phelan down in his district in Jefferson County. So all that's heating up, and we've got all of it for you at quorumreport.com.
All right, before I let you go, real quick, how many people before we get to that rally? How many people is a successful rally for in that context?
I hate to go there, Chad, because I'll give you an answer, but I hate to go there because whatever I say, then they're going to work real hard to get more than that.
I know. I
have the power and the influence of this show, and frankly, of both of our voices.
That's right.
I would say, for a Texas House race, I said a version of this about the Glenn Rogers versus Mike Alcott and one other guy race. There was a big event where they had about 300 people for rallying for Alcott against Glenn Rogers. That's a big crowd for a Texas House race for sure. I do remember that when Governor Abbott was rallying people against former Representative Sarah Davis and Representative Lyle Larson at the time, in San Antonio, that those had much smaller crowds, maybe 100 people or so. I would say it's a giant crowd if Paxton gets 350 to 400 people there.
All right. We'll see you next week. Scott, thank you very much.
Thanks, Chad. Talk soon.
That's right. That's Scott Braddock, editor of quorumreport.com. We'll be right back.
She's a good to me. Oh, yeah. Say, I got a woman way from town.
The Chad Hasty Show can be heard all over West Texas, weekdays from 5 to 7 p.m. Tune in on News Talk 95.1 and 790 KFYO in Lubbock, News Talk 940 in Amarillo, News Talk 94.7 and 1470 KYYW in Abilene, and in Wichita Falls on News Talk 96.3 and 1290. The Chad Hasty Show. Make it a part of your drive home, weekdays from 5 to 7 p.m.
Diane from Michigan, a disabled senior citizen trying to get by. Henry from Florida, a veteran fighting to make ends meet. Elena from Arizona, a mother struggling to feed her daughter. Hi, I'm Connie Britton, and I support Feeding America because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year, like Diane, Henry, and Elena. Learn more at feedingamerica.org. Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
Well, bless my soul, what's wrong with me? I'm itching like a man on a fuzzy tree.
All right, welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show. Appreciate Scott Braddock for joining us.
I'm all shook up.
Let's see. Gary in Alaska. It's been a while since we've heard from Gary in Alaska. Saying it's 33 degrees in Homer. Pretty close to Lubbock temps. Keep warm, my friend. Well, you as well, Gary. Let's see. Wes weighing in. Not a big Elvis fan, but I did read Bill O'Reilly's Killing the Legends. Really felt sorry for the man. All he wanted to do is play music. All he had around him were leeches. Another text. Ken in Lubbock. Hey, Chad, you should play the Sweater song from Weezer as an introductory before Nick speaks. I like that. That's a good one. I like that. I need to find Nick's music. I think that's it. Another texter. I will definitely be voting for Liz Case. Texas Tribune did a ranking of Texas House members strictly on their votes. Stan Lambert had only 15 Republican members more liberal voting than he is out of all the Republicans in the House. I'm voting for Liz Case from texture earlier this evening. All right, let's see. Oh, how about this news? The National Park Service backing down from a plan to remove the William Penn statue from the Philadelphia park to make it more inclusive. The National Park Service say that no changes to the William Penn statue are now planned. A little bit ago, Mayorkas, who absolutely should be impeached, fired, said, quote, "It's very important to understand that when an individual is released, they are released into immigration enforcement proceedings, which the RNC research set out. That means they're released into communities and asked to appear in court years from now." Very good point. You can tell the administration and the Democrats are starting to get a little bit worried. Just a little bit worried about this whole immigration deal, about some of the wokeism that's going on. You can tell it's an election year now. Now, they're not going to do anything about the border. They're not going to go through and make sure the border is secure. Don't think they're going to. There was a report earlier. Here we go. This from NBC News. Biden asking for Mexican help to stop the record surge of migrants. The administration is increasingly leaning on Mexico to curb the record flow of migrants crossing into the U.S., but Mexico has its own list of ambitious asks for the U.S., say officials from both governments familiar with the discussions. So here you go. You've got the Biden administration asking Mexico now to help curb illegal migration. But they're suing Texas at every turn. Anytime Texas wants to try and do something to stop the flow of illegal immigration into the state of Texas, we get sued. But now Biden's asking Mexico to stop. We need your help. And Mexico not complying because they know they're not going to get anything from this administration. And the administration's not going to do anything to Mexico. When we come back, Michelle Obama is very worried about the United States. Very worried about the upcoming election. We'll be right back.
Call in to the Chad Hasty Show at 1-800-687-0790. The Chad Hasty Show, broadcasting on the Texas Town Square Media Network. Today's markets from the Texas Department of Ag.
Well, howdy, neighbors. Texas feeder cattle auctions were up, reporting prices steady to $5 higher. Cattle futures, though, were mixed. February live cattle futures down 62 cents, closed at $169.95. January feeder cattle futures up 75, closed at $223.88. March cotton futures up, closed at $80.42. March wheat futures down 13 cents, closed at $6.15 a bushel. March corn down a nickel to close at $4.55. And January soybeans down a dime, closed at $12.39 a bushel. January soybean meal futures down 50 cents, closed at $368.10 per ton. January Class 3 milk futures up a couple of pennies, closed at $15.14 a hundred. February crude oil futures down $3.04, closed at $70.77 per barrel. And the Dow Jones up 216 points, closed at 37,683. And that's the market roundup from the Texas Department of Agriculture. I'm your commissioner, Sid Miller. And remember, friends, Texas agriculture matters. Sold.
News and talk of West Texas. News Talk 95.1 and 790 KFYO. Hasty, talking the news at the start, middle, and end of your drive home, and when news breaks. This is the Chad Hasty Show.
Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show, final half hour of the program. Appreciate you being out there today. Tomorrow on the show, Dallas Mayor Eric Johnson scheduled to join us. We'll also visit with Jeff Burnett with the NFIB, talk about small business in Texas. And then Wednesday, for those of you in Lubbock who have questions about the big switchover from LP&L and ERCOT and having to choose your own energy provider, we'll have Matt Rose on at 5:35, and then Cody Clark is a candidate for SD30, that race we were talking about with Scott Braddock. He'll be on Wednesday at 6:05. So just over the next couple of days, you know who the guests are, and tune in. And also we'll have those interviews up on the podcast as well. Michelle Obama is terrified about what could happen in the 2024 election, folks. According to Fox News, former First Lady Michelle Obama claiming that the looming 2024 presidential election keeps her up at night and warned we cannot take this democracy for granted. I agree with that. We can't. That's why we shouldn't have Joe Biden as president. Obama appeared on an episode of the On Purpose podcast, which was released Monday. While the podcast is about mental health, the conversation became political when she was asked about concerns that occupy her mind. Quote, what is the thing that keeps you up at night? What is your biggest fear now after having overcome so many? The podcast host asked. What has Michelle Obama had to overcome lately in her life? Nothing. Oh, she's former First Lady. Oh, no. Must have been so tough. Michelle Obama says it has less to do with me personally and more to do with the world that we're in. There's such a thing as knowing too much. And when you've been married to the President of the United States who knows everything about everything in the world, sometimes you just want to turn it off. Well, Michelle, you could just go away. You don't have to do podcasts. You don't have to go on TV shows. You don't have to be part of Netflix. You could just shh. You don't have to get involved. Well, she went on to note concerns ranging from the wars across various regions, the future of artificial intelligence, to climate change. She's very worried about climate change. That's why they bought that big home on Martha's Vineyard. They're very concerned about climate change. Voter turnout being one of the problems on her mind as well. America's upcoming presidential election remains chief among them. Well, those are the things that keep me up because you don't have control over them. And you wonder where we are in this. Where are our hearts? What's going to happen in this next election, Obama said. I'm terrified about what could possibly happen because our leaders matter. Who we select, who speaks for us, who holds that bully pulpit affects us in a way that sometimes I think people take for granted. She then suggested that many people downplay the impact of government, wondering if it really does anything. While she says government does, quote, everything for us, and we cannot take this democracy for granted. No, government doesn't do everything for you. What an insulting thing to say. But again, that goes back, remember when Barack Obama was telling people, you didn't build that. You didn't do that. You had help. It was the government. What an insulting thing to say. The government does everything for us. No, I don't think so. Not for those who are busting their ass every single day to keep their businesses open. People who are trying to better themselves, people who are trying to keep the doors open of their business, trying to employ people. Government ain't working for them. The government's not doing anything for them. But this is how the left thinks. Is that not only should the government do everything for you, you should want the government to do everything for you. You should embrace big government. Again, the quote is, government does everything for us. We cannot take this democracy for granted. She then went on to say, we cannot take this democracy for granted. Sometimes I worry that we do. Those are the things that keep me up. Again, maybe in her life, government has done everything for her. Maybe in Joe's life, government has done everything for him. I'll give you, there are some elected officials where they would not be rich if it were not for their government job. And the money that they have made off of their government jobs somehow. They've made very good money off of it. But again, to go through and say the government does everything for you, it's what they want. It's what the Democrats want. And remember, this is a person who has said before that she was never proud of America. Married to a guy who wanted to totally remake the United States. So I guess no one should be surprised by her ignorant comments. But it again shows you where the left is coming from in this country. It's a good reminder, a stark reminder of what we're up against. When you hear people say, oh, well, it keeps me up at night. Again, she never goes into specifics here about what exactly is keeping you up at night about the election. That we may have more freedom, that we may have a better economy. See, it would make sense if she said, you know, what really keeps me up at night is all the people who are struggling out there. All the people who, you know, they had great businesses and their businesses have been wrecked. Their businesses are failing right now. Well, this is concerning to me. This is what keeps me up at night, is that so many of these mom and pops are failing. So many of these people who could afford groceries this time last year or 2 years ago, they can't afford groceries now. See, that would make sense. That would be okay to say, that's what keeps me up at night. But of course, you can't do that because it's her party that has ruined this country. It's her party. It's her husband who's the one pulling the strings behind the scenes of this administration. And so they can't say that, well, what's happening right now, this is what keeps us up at night. The horrible situation the country is in. But now she can't say that. Can't say that at all. 806-680-2790. When we come back, we'll begin to wrap things up. Your phone calls, your text. I'll have another example of inflation and how it's just wrecking the restaurant industry. We'll be right back.
I'm Ryan Seacrest. First responders are people who stand for a greater purpose. They will be there for you when nobody else is, to help you, your family, your community. This is their selfless promise. This is their sworn duty, to protect, to serve, to help. When you call 911, first responders show up now. Let's show up for the people who show up for us every day and every night.
Go to firstrcf.org and make a difference today.
To battle is to fight, to struggle, to overcome, and ultimately for the Marine Corps, it means to win. There is no alternative. It's not just a statement of intent. It's a promise to our nation. A promise kept for more than 2 centuries. A promise of the Marines.
Well, since my baby left me, well, I found a new place to dwell. Well, it's down at the end of Lonely Street, that heartbreak hotel where I'll be.
All All right, welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show as we begin to wrap things up. I did this over the weekend when we had the special edition of the show on Saturday, but I thought it'd be interesting to bring it back up for those who may not have heard it. Story out of Fox Business, and it goes to what we're seeing around the country when it comes to mom and pop restaurants. And sometimes not even mom and pop restaurants, sometimes just, medium-sized restaurants. Maybe they've got a few locations. Story here, inflation, a driving force behind many of the challenges businesses face today, has caused one restaurant owner to charge nearly $16 for a BLT due to rising cost. Will Restaurants Investment Group founder and CEO Brian Will broke down his monthly expenses after a friend confronted him about the price of a $16 sandwich. The wholesale cost of the popular sandwich, only $5 according to Will, but the need to cover operational expenses is what causes the meal that was once $12.99 3 years ago to be $15.99 today. Will detailed his monthly expenses, sharing insight on the business side of running a restaurant and justifying the rising prices. Will spends $20,000 a month on renting a space that houses one of his restaurants in a, quote, new mixed-use development, arguing that it costs a lot given the location. Now, $20,000 a month in rent, that is a lot. But going back to it, $20,000 a month in rent, utilities are $6,000 a month. Labor in December alone was $60,000. He went on to say, which means that I've got $86,000 of base cost of the day I opened the doors on January 1. $86,000. You figure in a 32% food cost, I have $11 of gross profit in that sandwich. You take all the cost divided by $11 gross profit, I have to sell 93,000 sandwiches in a month just to break even. And that's what businesses around the nation are dealing with. You think about that. And this is what so many people, when they look at the price of food, they go, well, it doesn't cost that much to make a burger. What's going on? Well, one, you know, the cost of the food cost, what it was this year compared to last year, compared to the year before that. And then, you got to put in, well, what are the property taxes? how much is insurance? He brought that up as well. This is even before insurance kicks in. He said, my revenue per operation has dropped about $350,000 per store while the rent is up, labor up 30%, insurance up 40%. And then again, you look at the cost of labor and what we've seen around the country, the fight for 15. Everybody wanting to get paid more money for sometimes jobs that should be low-wage jobs, entry-level jobs that are not meant to support a family of four. And everybody wants to make $20 an hour working that job. Well, okay, if that's going to happen, guess what's going to happen with the price of food? It's going to increase. It's going to go up because, the owner still has to make money. In order to pay everybody, you still got to make money. Oh, and he's got to feed his family too. That's why you see so many of these smaller restaurants, they're going to the apps for everything. Had somebody comment the other day, we went to a place that didn't have physical menus. They have the QR code right there on the table. You see a lot of those now. Well, it's because they don't want to pay for menus. They don't want to pay to have to get the menu changed. They don't have to pay to replace the menu if someone messes it up. It's just extra cost. They'd rather just have it up on a website. Bam, there you go. You scan it and you're done. Anything that you can do to cut down on costs. Otherwise, it's just going to cost you more when you go and order your food. I went to a food truck the other night. By the time I got the burger, and it was a very good burger. Nick, it was $20. It was $20. It was a double cheese. It was a bacon double cheeseburger. Came with a side. $20. Now again, I thought it was very good. And it was a local place. It was a local mom and pop. But $20. And unfortunately, I don't get mad about it. I didn't get upset about it. I just went, wow, burgers aren't cheap anymore. But there are going to be a lot of people who say, they're not going to go back because it costs so much. Well, there's a reason why it costs so much. Operating cost, very high. Very high. And it's not getting any cheaper. So, when Michelle Obama says, I can't sleep because I worry about the future of our country because they may reelect Donald Trump. So she doesn't care about you. She doesn't care about how your business is doing. She and the Democrats aren't worried about whether you can afford to go out to eat. She and the Democrats aren't worried that you can't afford groceries. You and your family can't afford the price of meat out there. She's not worried about that. What she's worried about is that you're going to throw Joe Biden out of office and that the mean orange guy is going to get back in. But let me tell you something, folks. Even if it were Nikki Haley, you think Michelle Obama would be sleeping peacefully at night? No. She would tell people that Nikki Haley's just as dangerous, just as racist, just as bad as Donald Trump. Because that's what they want you to believe. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Go Michigan. Be watching that game when I get home shortly. Stay safe if you're driving around out there and you got snow on the ground or possibility of snow on the ground. Stay warm. God bless you all. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 5 p.m.
The Chad Hasty Show, a presentation of the Texas Town Square Media Network. The views and opinions expressed during the Chad Hasty Show are not necessarily the views of this station staff, management, advertisers, or Town Square Media.